Yo, this is Zavier from Team Pink Zenith coming at you with a Darkness deck profile from Dark Irregulars. So, starting off, starters Deranged Singular. Great starter. So good that all my opponents at the Anaheim Regionals tried to kill it as soon as they could. And I lost to those players. I win 2-3. So, Deranged Singular, great card. He's got a Darkness ability, which it's only useful because it's Darkness. It comes in handy a little, not much. It's just Darkness. It's not GB restricted, which is good. When it boosts, it gets plus 2k. So it's a 7k booster, which could be really nice for you're on a grade 2 Vanguard, they're at grade 3, hits a magic number, so it's not bad. And then, you could also call it too when the side rear guards swing it with a grade 2. Its best skill is the second one, which is when you stride, you put him and all your grade 1 or higher rear guards to soul, and then draw 2 cards. Majority of the time, it's just going to be you shove him to soul, draw 2, which is already really good. However, if you rushed with Were Tiger Jaeger, you can shove him to soul and then get an extra draw off of Were Tiger's skill. So it allows you to rush and not suffer from it because you'll still have all those cards in soul, which is where you'd want them to be anyways. Next up, the main grade 3. 4 copies of One Who Scatters Sin, Scharhrot. He's the main grade 3 altogether. He's your Vanguard for my build at least, because mine's a Scharhrot build. And he's also the best rear guard of your grade 3s. In fact, he's one of the best rear guards in the deck overall. So his on-stride skill is you may soul charge 2, which the you may is really nice for if you're getting later in the game. You can't really afford to soul charge that much. You can just use a Dark Knight, shove it to soul, activate Darkness. If you do soul charge 2, then if you have at least 4 more in soul with Darkness, which is fairly easy to do because you'll probably have ridden at least 1 card with Darkness, he'll have shoved himself into soul, so that's another thing with Darkness. So it's fairly easy to have that first stride. If not, you will have it second stride. So if you have at least 4 more with Darkness and soul, then your opponent chooses a rear guard and retires it, which is very nice for decks that need rear guards on board, or ones that keep just enough, with Luard. They keep 1 rear guard, they're not using their on stride skill. His other skill, his GB2 skill, is what makes him such a good rear guard. GB2 Vanguard or rear guard. When he attacks, it's Darkness. If you have 10 or more in soul, he gets plus 5k, and your opponent can't guard with grade 0s, which is very nice for if you get a ton of triggers, you just stack it on him, and there's a very high chance that your opponent's going to have to take it. So he's very nice. I run 2 copies of my backup grade 3. A lot of people will build their Darkness deck around him, Glens and Vampire. I prefer to build mine around Scharhrot. He's not a bad card. His GB1 skill is very good for a deck focusing around Enigmatic Assassin. I actually don't run Enigmatic Assassin. I'll explain that later. But his GB1 is at the end of your turn, so you can even do it the turn you strode. Darkness, choose a card with Darkness from your field or hand, shove it to soul, and then if you have at least 6 or more in soul, you can pay the cost. If you do, you draw a card, and then if you have 15 or more in soul, you countercharge 1, and your opponent retires 1. So it still gets that retire off, and you could put a Were Tiger in soul, get a draw off of that for free essentially, since he countercharges. So he's not a bad ride, he's just not optimal in my build. And And then his second skill is when he's placed Vanguard or Rear, +1, check top 5 of your deck, choose any number of darkness from among them, put them to soul, and until end of turn he gets 1k power for each put to soul, and then the rest go to bottom of deck in any order. So he's just in a very nice way to just get a ton of cards in soul. The power doesn't really matter all that much because it doesn't normally hit any magic numbers unless all 5 of them are darkness and you put all 5 to soul. So the power doesn't matter all too much, but it's just a nice way to get cards in soul. Next up is 4 copies of the best grade 2, Demented Executioner. So his main skill that you want to use is his auto on place skill. It checks top 7 of the deck for up to 1 card with darkness, put it to soul, shuffle your deck. So it's really nice to search out cards to put in soul like Were Tiger Jaeger to get more draws off. His other skill is an Act Darkness Counterblast 1. If you have at least, I believe it's 6 or more. 6 or more, he gets plus 2k. 10 or more, he gets plus 3k. So you're probably going to get just plus 5k on him, which is really nice. If you can't give him power from anything else, it allows him to hit a Vanguard without a boost, because this deck does not boost. You only play a booster if you really need just to have rear guards like against Luard, which you gotta just remember to do. I lost a game against Luard at the regionals because I forgot to drop down an extra rear guard, and I got Phantom Blast with Diablo'd. But so he's really good grade 2. Next up, I run 3 copies of Brennan Vampire, Scharhrot specific grade 2. On attack, darkness, counterblast 1. He gets plus 1k for every card in soul, which can normally make him a pretty big attacker. And then after the battle, he goes to soul, draws you a card. I hit stand triggers quite a bit in this deck, so I normally like to save him for my last attack because he goes away and then I can't stand anything. But he's pretty big numbers, he gets you in draw, so you're not really losing anything. And you can do this even if you have, and there's no soul requirements, you can do this even if you have maybe 3 cards in soul in your first stride, which you're never going to have that little. But still, you can if you have that. Next up, I run 4 copies of the Covetous Succubus, who's essentially Flying Librarian, but with darkness. It's not as good as Flying Librarian overall, but she's pretty nice. In a darkness-specific build, she's overall better. I do run 1 copy of the Flying Librarian, because it's still a decent card, but she's not as handy in most situations just because she doesn't have darkness. So Flying Librarian is on place, counterblast 1, soul charge 2, and then if you have at least 6 or more in soul, you draw a card, 10 or more in soul, countercharge 1. So she'll essentially be free, soul charge 2, draw a card. However, she is an 8k and she doesn't have darkness. The Covetous Succubus is darkness skill, so you have to have already soul charged to use her skill, but your Scharhrot grade 3 is probably going to get you that immediately, on stride, so you're going to be fine on that. So it's counterblast 1 on place. You soul charge 1 instead of 2. Then if the number of cards in your soul is 6, you countercharge, and then if it's 10, you draw 2, discard 1. So she gets you less cards soul charged, but overall she's better because she has darkness. But I still, of course, run the 1 Flying Librarian. Next up for grade 1s, I run 4 copies of Closet Balloon as my PG. I've seen some people still run a copy of the Succubus of Avarice. I've tested that out. I ended up liking 4 Closet Balloon better because of his skill. Comes in handy quite a bit. So he has a darkness skill, so he counts. So if you soul charge him or have to write him, he counts for Scharhrot's 4 or more with darkness and soul. And if you really need to you can put it to soul for power off of like Glenn's End, or for your search off of Demented Executioner. The Darkness skill is just, he gets plus 2k, making him an 8k, so he's not terrible, but I've never used that skill once. And then he's got the normal PG skill. It blocks any unit but must be from hand. And then when you PG with him, so during the PG, if you have 10 or more in soul and another copy of him in soul, you then draw a card. So it's very nice to like keep your hand, because this deck needs resources. Hand is very important, and Closet Balloon is really nice for that. And then I don't use the Succubus of Avarice because I can still search him out of soul if I need to. And overall, I'd rather keep my grade 1 or less in hand and not retired, so he's better for that. Next up, the best grade 1 in the deck, your main stride fodder, Were-Tiger Jaeger. So he is a stride fodder, but only if you have 2 or more things with darkness and soul. But of course, that's not going to matter all that much, because you're probably having ridden at least 1, and your starter goes to soul and he does darkness. So he's a stride fodder, and then his main skill, that's his best skill, is when he gets put to soul, through any means, you can counterblast 1, draw a card, which is very nice for keeping a hand, which is necessary nowadays. Then he has an act ability, which is darkness, and it activates when he's in the soul. You counterblast 1 and discard a card. If the number of cards in your soul is 6 or more, you soul charge. Then if there's 10 or more, you bounce this guy to hand. So he's an easy, you can fetch out a stride fodder if you know you're going to need one for next turn. Next up, 3 Succubus of Pure Love. Because you run 6 grade 3s in the deck, need stride fodder. It's very important to stride in this deck. You pretty much can't do anything if you're not striding. So stride fodder is really nice. And then if you really need to, you can search out Scharhrot if you only have Glenn's End. Lastly, I run 4 copies of Listig Vampire. I've considered dropping him down to 3 and putting Succubus of Pure Love up to 4, but for now I'm keeping him at 4. He doesn't have darkness, which is a downside, but he's essentially how you get your PG out of soul. When you guard with him, you can choose a card from hand, put it to soul, like any card from hand, so even like a crit trigger to put back in for Bread of Mouth later. And then he'll grab a normal unit from soul, bounce it to hand. So you can of course like grab him with a PG. You can put Were-Tiger from hand to soul to get an extra draw off, and then of course still bounce the PG to hand, which will then allow you to PG for that. He's a very, very nice card. I've used him quite a bit for if I don't have a PG. Lastly, for triggers, got 4 the Scharhrot crit, because it's an 8 crit deck, so 4 of that, 4 Dark Knight of Nightmare Land. Crits are very nice in this deck. Very nice, because you have a lot of things freestanding and or making guard restrict. So crits are very nice. With your main stride, all of them are going back to deck. So they're all really nice. They all also go to soul for their own skills. Like, he's very nice for just starting darkness. Succubus is nice for getting draws and power. However, you cannot actually start darkness off of this. For example, if your stride is an on-attack darkness, you cannot swing with the stride first, shove her to soul, and have darkness active. Timing doesn't work that way. So she won't activate your darkness for your stride, but it's still really good. Then I run 4 copies of Monochrome of Nightmare Land. Like, I've had so many opponents just get so angry anytime they see me just play this card. because it's just so good. It puts itself back to deck, so you have just a ton of standing. So it puts itself back to deck, shuffles, soul charges 1, so it can activate darkness as well. Then if you have 6 or more in soul, you countercharge, 10 or more you draw. So it's just very nice. I've had it where I've had low amount of cards in deck and I just keep going at her until I have just 1 card left in deck, bread of mouth, put all my triggers back, and just my opponent has a really hard time. Then for heals, 4 copies of the Fighter's Collection heal, Medical Specialist Vincent. He's really nice solely for the fact that you can G-Guard with him and still have him to put back into the deck with bread of mouth. Because when you G-Guard into the G-Guard version of him, he can put himself into soul, which is just amazing. And for strides, I run 1 copy of Sorrowful Slice of Gyrus. He's pretty much always the first stride. Even if I've done things like G-Guarded and then could go into something else, I pretty much still end up going into him because of you need to get a soul. The other ones don't really get you as much soul as he does. He is Act, Counterblast 1, flip up anything from the G-Zone, so you'll primarily be flipping up Sea Breeze. And then you Soul Charge 3. And then for each different grade among the cards you Soul Charged, for example, if you Soul Charge 2 grade 1s, 1 grade 0, that's 2 cards. You get to choose a rear guard and give them plus 5k. And then if at least one of the cards Soul Charged had Darkness, you can bounce a grade 3 from Soul to hand. So I've also used him to correct rides multiple times for, like, if I Soul Charge Scharhrot and I'm on Glenn's End. Very nice for getting stride fodder for later. He's overall just a really good stride. Then we have the main stride of the deck. One who splits darkness, Bredemouth, or Bledermouth in English. He's the main stride of the deck. He's essentially what makes this deck be able to do anything. Because, so he's Darkness, GB2, on attack, Counterblast 1, Persona Flip 1. If you have at least 10 cards in Soul, he will give 2 units plus 5k. I'll primarily try to give it to 2 Scharhrots on rear guards if they are there. And then all your grade 0... Oh, you also choose 2 cards from hand and put them to Soul for the cost. Which is very nice for if you have triggers in hand, you can shove them to Soul as well to just add more cards there. Because he puts all grade 0s from Soul back into deck and shuffles your deck. And then at the end of his battle, he'll restand with Drive -2. He's just really nice. I like to go down to like 1 card left in deck, use his skill. My deck is just nothing but triggers. That's also another reason why Were Tiger's pretty good, because you'll have nothing but triggers in hand. You can still get a stride fodder back if you really need it. He's just such an amazing stride. I get a lot of stand triggers so off of him as well, so it really helps put on a lot of pressure on his turn. And he's the main reason why I don't run Enigmatic Assassin, because I already have a problem with drive checking him, clogging up my drive checks, and I don't want Enigmatic Assassin to make it so I get less triggers. So Enigmatic Assassin is good, but preferably I don't use it solely because I want to get triggers during his drive check, and I like Enigmatic Assassin primarily for the turns that I am going in, that I'm going into something with power, like Geels, which I don't do often anyways. Speaking of which, I run 2 copies of Geels because every now and then I can still go into him and he's still good. So he's Act, Persona Flip 1, I actually don't remember his checkpoints. If your number of cards in Soul is 10 or more, he gets plus 10k. Then 15 or more, he gets red text. Your opponent can't call grade 1s or higher to guard him. and then if you have two, and then if he's not your first stride, essentially, he'll get a crit. So he's 36 with a crit and guard restrict, pretty nice. He's second stride or you never stride into him, because at that point you're like any later strides and you don't have enough in deck to survive. So either second stride him or I'll never go into him during a fight. But he's still pretty good for if like your opponent doesn't have that much damage, you don't think Breadmouth is going to do anything. He's still pretty nice. Run one copy of the GB8. So GB8 continuous, all of your front row, like him and the rear guards, I believe. Yeah, they get +1 crit and 13k for every 13 cards in the soul. Primarily only getting the 13, you're not getting 26. You're losing if you're at 26 in soul, because you're just decking out. But he's still really nice for like your opponent survived all your stuff. You just go into him, put on a lot of pressure. They have to guard everything, and sometimes they just can't. Especially if you have like Scharhrot as your rear guard, because they can't use zeros to guard. They'd have to just essentially PG everything or drop a ton of cards, which they just wouldn't have at this point in game. So he's pretty nice to finish it off. Normally the games don't last until him, but he's still pretty nice. I run one copy of Mask of Demonic Frenzy Ricrius. I pretty much never go into him, but he's there for the option to. Primarily, he either just sits in the G zone or he's used for G assist, but he's there just in case I need it for whatever reason. He's Darkness on attack, Soul Charge 2, or you may Soul Charge 2. Then if you have 6 or more in Soul and he hits, your opponent retires 1. And then if you have 15 or more in Soul, he gets +1k for every card in Soul, so he's a pretty nice beater. But overall, you'll probably never need to go into him. I've essentially only used him as G assist. One copy of One Steeped in Sin Scharhrot. He's pretty nice for decks that require a board, like say Victor. He's a pretty nice board wipe. Because he's GB2 Darkness on attack, counterblast 1. Put all your rear guards to soul, which makes him not good against like Shadow Paladins, because Diablo will just kill you. Then I believe he just gets the 10k no matter what. Yes, he gets 10k no matter what. Then if you have 10 or more in soul, you retire your opponent's board. And then 15 or more in soul, he gets guard restrict of restricting only sentinels. So Gilles is overall better for the guard restrict point, but he's nice for board wipe. He's also nice if you're on Glen's End and your grade 2s are just Brennan Vampire and you need the Scharhrot name, or you have the crit and you want the Scharhrot name. That's primarily what he's been used for me. He's also normally been one of my G assist targets. Either that or I flip him with Luchirus. Of course, one Air Element Sea Breeze, because it's a stride deck, you need to be able to stride or else this deck's not going to be able to function. And for G-Guards, 2 copies of Medical Studies of Extinction Vincent. He's the Fighter's Collection G-Guard, the flipping one. So when you go into him, that's when the heal will shove itself to soul. And then its skill is just GB1, flip up a G-Guard, Soul Charge 1, and he gets 5k shield for every 5 in soul. So sometimes the heal putting in soul will actually, like, you always want to use the heal first, because he might bump you up to the next one. For example, if you have 13 cards in soul, and you use his skill first, you'll have 14, and you'll only get 10k shield, and then he'll go to soul putting you at 15. When you could use his skill first, put you up at 14, his skill 15 with 15k shield. I run 2 copies of him. He's decent numbers, but like his main purpose is just it allows you to put heals to soul for then Breadmouth to be able to shuffle them back into deck. Then I run 1 copy Nighttime Gentleman Saint Germain. He's pretty nice again. He's a very situational card, but he's still pretty nice. He's 10k. He gets 10k shield for having 10 or more in soul, and then if you have 15 or more in soul when he's placed, you can choose anything like him or like all your guardians. Like maybe if you're against Kaiser, you can target your PG and like just all your board because why not? And you give him resist, which is so again like Kaiser, he can stop your PGs from dying. And he is a free 10k shield. But overall, like Vincent can either get you 10k or more, as well as putting the heals back. So I'll primarily go into him, but he's not bad. One copy of Cryptid Knowledge Sabnak. This one, other than the Vincent G-Guard, this is probably the one I use the most. Because, well, I mean, other than first G-Guard, because I also run the one copy of False Dark Wings that Grap at Milat. She'll sometimes be my first one for if I need soul, because she's soul charged 2 plus 5k shield, so she's not big numbers, but she does get you soul. But I normally always end up flipping her for the Vincent G-Guard. For Sabnak, he's on place, Counterblast 1, so you do need Counterblast, which is not that big of a problem, seeing is because the cat stand trigger just countercharges literally everything. So Counterblast is never really that big of a problem, but some situations it might be. So you Counterblast 1, then but I believe it's only when your opponent's Vanguard attacked, and if you have 10 or more in soul, he gets 5k shield, and your Vanguard gets 5k power. So that's really nice for like playing against something like Domination. It gets you 5k on your Vanguard and just can stop a lot of their attacks. It's very nice against like current Aqua Force because they don't really gain numbers. Although if you're playing against Blue Wave once set 13 drops, there's a chance it will be useless there because of Valeos. But overall, he's really nice. And yeah, that's my deck.